Today they're gonna make us sweat the noodles.
You gotta earn them
We
today.
need to earn them.
So good we came back for more. I'm taking 3 Italian chefs around Shanxi province, famous for its noodles, and it's day 2. Today, it's time to play tourist. After a chef's breakfast of coffee and cigarettes, we pile into the van and drive an hour and a half north to Shinjo. Shinjo is an old city, almost 2,000 years old. Traders from here used to set out for Xinjiang, Mongolia, and Russia, and the city's position between mountains made it a military stronghold for many centuries, protecting the northern approach to the province. More recently, it's been one of Shanxi's well-known coal towns. But Shinjo is trying to change that reputation, and they've built a massive theme park styled after an ancient city to show off their other heritage. It's super touristy, and not the kind of thing I'd usually take 3 busy chefs to see. But the Shinjo area is also an agricultural capital for what China calls coarse grains: sorghum, millet, buckwheat, and oats. In this area, that's what the noodles are made from. A few years ago, my noodle mentors in Shanxi told me if I wanted to see the Shinjo area's traditional noodles and how they're made, then I needed to go to this ancient city. And I did. And you know what? They were right. In Shanxi, even the tourist sites can be about noodles, and so that's where we're headed, to the Epcot of noodles and the capital of coarse grains. I wanted to show the chefs the variety of grains and some of the various noodle-making methods in this part of Shanxi, so I picked 4 shops for lunch. The first thing we saw were the oat noodles, which we had also seen the night before. These are made with oat flour and hot water, which is mixed into a dough, smeared out into the tubes, and then steamed. They're really typical of the northern part of Shanxi, but a pain in the ass to make, which is why most shops we found back in Taiyuan were using pre-made frozen ones from a factory. The ones at the ancient city were a more rustic version than at the fancy Taiyuan restaurant, but they were still handmade and they were delicious after being torn apart and dunked in the tomato and cilantro sauce.
Again, this is grandmother noodle, no?
Roasted grandma noodles.
Roasted grandmother noodle. I like it. Let's go to the next.
Yeah, next one. The way it was explained to me, when they built this theme park, they wanted to showcase the region's noodle heritage, but they took an interesting approach. Instead of just renting space to noodle shops, they held a competition. The rules were simple. You had to make the noodles the traditional way, by hand or with historical tools, and you couldn't be a famous chef. No sheeting machines or extruders or motors allowed. That's why, despite this being a tourist trap, it's actually a great place to see handmade noodles. Most shops and cities have long since moved on to machines. This one was special. These noodles called hele are made from 100% buckwheat, which makes a very hard dough. In order to generate enough force to push that dough through a die and turn it into noodles, they have to do it this way, with this long lever, 1 press per order. But of course, this isn't feasible in a restaurant today. And now these are usually made with a motorized extruder that can sit on top of a pot of boiling water. You can't taste the difference between this old school method and a motorized extruder, but it was still cool to see the traditional way, which actually requires somebody to sit on the lever to generate enough torque to push the dough through the press.
I was really impressed to see the guy who's sitting on this extruding machine and like pressing down this buckwheat noodle, which had a very, very nice texture.
Spazio.
It's a pork stock, this one.
So it's pork stock and vinegar, of course. I think here vinegar is part of...
It's a religion.
It's a religion, right?
Apart from noodles, Shanxi is also famous across China for its aged vinegar. On a different trip here a few years ago, our hosts brought out vinegar shots for everyone to drink before the meal, and then left more vinegar on the table to mix and drink with 7-Up. Very good, huh?
Good.
Best so far.
Really?
I honestly think that China does the best stocks in the world.
This is the one with the three layers.
Ah, okay, that we were looking for.
Yes. A few years before, I sent Riccardo a picture of the noodle from this shop. We've been talking about it ever since. This is the one that we've been talking about for 3 years.
Finally.
You're saying in Italy there's no three-layer noodle like this, right?
No.
That you guys have seen.
No. We would do only with the cheapest one.
Yeah.
Purist.
So the way that they explained this to us last time was that the whole grain that's in the center, the sorghum, is a coarse grain. It used to be a grain for poor people. It used to be things that people who didn't have white flour would eat. So they hid it in the center of the white flour, and that's how this noodle was invented. If they didn't have enough white flour to make a pure wheat noodle, they put a little bit of the coarse grain in the center.
They should call it the cheat noodle. Because they're cheating.
The cheating noodle?
They're cheating noodle. I like the texture.
Yeah.
That is very good.
So after waiting 3 years to try this, what do you think, Riccardo?
You know how many times I tried, but never succeed.
You tried to make it?
I love the 3 layers pasta, something that I will try to develop with the Italian style. It's a nice way to combine 2 different flour, or even 3, why not? As soon as you keep the simple condiment, to highlight the 3 layers of pasta, why not? Why not? Now I understand the technique. When I make a layer, then another layer, then another layer, and then I pass through the machine. I never come.
Don't stick.
Yeah.
I really like it. Texture is great.
I mean, the difference is that here, in the ancient city, all the places specialize in one noodle, right? So they do that noodle really well. Next noodle. One more noodle. No, it's always one more noodle. A few shops down, we stopped in to see a noodle called tajiar, the least obvious noodle-looking noodle. Before we left, I wanted the chefs to see how flexible the definition of a noodle can be in Shanxi. So we stopped into a shop that does tajiar. These are an old form of noodle, with records mentioning them going back more than 1,000 years. Instead of being rolled or pressed in an elaborate way like the other 3 noodles, they're kind of a lazy man's noodle. The dough is grated directly over the pot, and the blades of the grater cut into noodles the size and shape of a cornflake. She said this area's oldest starch.
The sorghum, yeah?
Yeah. If your stomach was very sensitive, or you were the day after you were sick, it's very soothing, this one.
In Italy as well, we used to use so much sorghum because it was extremely poor.
What they see that is very similar, that is the food of the people, right? Is the staple of the people. They're using pasta to basically feed themselves. And it's the same approach that we have in Italy, is really what brings these 2 cultures together. So it's the usage of noodles. That's what is very similar. A part of techniques, because all the techniques and the craft that they put in it is very, very similar.
That night we went back to Taiyuan, the capital, and continued to play tourist. Shanxi Huiguan is a big tourist trap with a huge song and dance show downstairs, different open kitchens all displaying their part of the menu. But we came here for one thing, so we went upstairs to a huge private room, a room big enough for the Noodle Show.
Why not? I want a noodle with you.
He says it's more than 10,000 strands there. They blow a balloon out of the dough.
Good.
One person has to suck all the air out of it. Wow. The Noodle Show is just a little light wheat-based entertainment. A performance. You don't eat these. So the chefs, The next day, the chefs would be on stage at Noodle School, giving back with a performance of their own. At Noodle School, the teachers and even the principal are noodle masters, but it's not often that 3 Italians show up with a few skills of their own. See what happens when Paolo, Riccardo, and Marino go to school. Stay tuned.
Why no pizza? Ask him, it's still why no pizza?
Is that it? Let me do the whole thing one more time and then you guys can choose.